All right, everyone. It's getting late on day 2 here. Brian and I thought about offering you guys a little introductory training into our cloud, our analytics platform in the cloud. And then we thought, wow, that's crazy. So we're going to do just an ad, basically, an introduction. And there are going to be a release of videos coming out after the holidays in which you and any of your people can be trained on our cloud analytics platform. So first, I want to just give an ad, and we'll let Brian really sell you on some of the technical details, but why we're doing this. So maybe all the faculty in the audience can relate to this situation when you've had a project going well for a couple of years, you've had a grad student or a postdoc in there working on your data analysis, and they get an awesome job, they take off, and it becomes the lowest priority they have when they're trying to start their new job is to completing that analysis or even communicating what they've done to you. And so you get stuck in limbo for quite a while. I know I've had that happen a couple times. It's tough to recover from. And across a network as large as we've got, if you think about how many graduate students, postdocs, and folks working on data analysis across the network we have, it's a staggering number. And so the idea that everybody was doing their own data analysis off on their own little laptop or computer just is a scary concept for how many times we'd have those hiccups with handoffs. So one of the objectives we have is for a cloud environment to do this in is just backups, making sure that we have at every step of the way what folks are doing. The other part of it is to have more collaboration. I mean, part of the power of our network is its interdisciplinarity. And letting a student go off and work privately on their own thing for a couple of years without being able to invite collaborators into that process sort of negates the whole point of gluing together this whole network. So we wanted to be able to allow collaboration. Now with caveats, we don't want it to be, oh, if you're working on data analysis for PSA, it has to be public and everybody's got to see it every step of the way. That doesn't make sense. But we want to empower teams to be able to invite collaborators into an analysis space, to be able to share code around, be able to see progress and comment that along the way. So that's the secondary goal there we have. And then lastly, we are starting to deal with some data for which we have some real serious data security problems. And so, if we let everybody right now to date, the way we have operated in the past is we provided live database connections to scientists on the teams. And then they would go in, they would, basically download data and work on it on their own laptops and machines. Well, now all of a sudden our data is starting to get scattered around the universe, downloaded on those various machines, and it's very difficult for us to maintain security in that kind of environment. We actually even have some legal requirements now for how we're allowed to do this with some of the data sets that we've got. So we decided, we really need to establish a process where nobody is ever downloading the data, where they're working in our own cloud environment. The data remains in place there, and we conduct our analysis there. Now, we want to be able to do that without asking people to learn a lot of new stuff. And so that's been the challenge we've set ourselves. We think we've got a system that's people are going to be very happy with now. It will support both R and SAS users, and they'll support them with very little learning of anything new. And for particular SAS users, SAS users are kind of addicted to the way SAS is laid out and the way it looks. And we're able to replicate that in the cloud in collaboration with SAS Via, who's donating SAS Via to our team to be able to use. And so we'll be able to run those on our servers, and I think we'll provide a very similar format to the way folks are used to doing that. So again, look forward to, that's just our intro. Look forward to a bunch of videos coming out about that. I'll hand it over to you, Brian.
Yeah, so everything Chris just said is, absolutely correct, that, we're worried about people leaving and stuff, but the important thing to remember is that this is kind of a carrot and stick approach. There are lots of benefits to it that are not just that we're worried about, grad students leaving. We want to make it more convenient for grad students to use and for people to get their research done. And one of the things that I think Chris is envisioning the longer term process, but we're kind of starting with the on-farm data. And so there are a lot of different teams that are using different sources of data right now. And maybe eventually we wrap all of them into sort of a common interface. But right now we're starting with the on-farm database. So those of you in Common Experiment 1 and 2, this is something we want you to be able to use, but we're not pushing it on you like next month. So don't worry about it. But right, so like I've got on the slide, you know, we all know that you've got to have backups, and not just back up your data, but back up your analysis and have security controls. And so this platform is called Via, and it's from SAS, but they provide it through NC State. And so if you're familiar with Python notebooks, it's very similar. You can use Python, R, or SAS. You can think of it like Google Docs for code, and you can share with whoever you want to or no one. And so then, you know, those of you who are professors, it's up to you to kind of rein in your grad student and make sure that they are eventually sharing their data and their analysis. But the important thing is that it's going to have built-in access to the PSA data. So it's super convenient to just say, oh, import on-farm data using an API key that is encrypted and is part of the platform. We only just got access to this platform fairly recently, which is why these, you know, tutorials are not finished yet. But like Chris said, they are coming. And if you, and he did mention, you know, if you're not familiar with the sort of Python notebook interface, there is SAS Studio, where, you know, you can do everything in exactly like you would on your personal laptop if you're a SAS user. If people are really excited about this and they don't particularly like the Python notebook interface, we could also put up an RStudio server instance so that you can have something that looks like RStudio on your computer, but it runs through the browser. And I know someone is going to have the question of, well, but I'm not an NC State employee. Well, we are working on that. They have assured us that we'll be able to offer this to everyone in the team. And then Chris and I will be kind of administering how it gets set up so that people don't have to deal with their passwords and things like that. Were you gonna jump in with something, Chris? All right. So then the bonus to this is, you know, once you build out a piece of tech infrastructure like this, then you get offers that now all of a sudden make sense. So we've been trying to get yield monitor data for years, and we were constantly stymied by legal requirements around how to protect corporate data. And now that we've got something where we can kind of have a firewall on the data, we've got this new partner, Ag Analytics. They're going to be providing yield monitor data from all the big combine manufacturers like John Deere, which will give spatial context. You know, right now in the on-farm trial, we go out and we basically collect 2 points for hand harvesting data. And this will give us, you know, the entire strip trial. And this is protected data because it is their, you know, corporate property, but they're giving it to us for free. And so we just have to kind of make sure that we play by certain privacy rules. A little bit about this company. They are, you know, an ag services provider, and I definitely recommend that you go check them out. They're really slick. And not only do they have, you know, this yield monitor data, but they've also built out a lot of APIs that some of us may find useful, like being able to look up growing degree days for the farms instead of having to calculate it yourself from the past weather data. And likewise, they have a variety of remote sensing products that we could kind of query live instead of having to store ourselves. So lots of interesting things that we can investigate what products they have. And they're partnering with a bunch of universities, but NC State is going to be a fairly major partner. And I hear from Sarah that they're going to be announcing that tomorrow. So look for a press release pretty soon, hopefully. And then how this is all going to work, they are going to provide us with a form that we have to get each of our farmers to sign, basically releasing their data from Ag Analytics back to us. They'll then only push fields that we have enrolled into our database, and this will only be accessible when you're logged into this cloud environment, and it will, sort of be encrypted on the back end. And that's everything that I had to say about it. But now we have a Q&A session, which certainly I welcome questions, but also if we want to continue any previous discussions, we have time for it.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Jupyter component, please?
Sure. So Jupyter Notebooks, I should have included a screenshot of how one works, but it's just like a script that you would use in R, or SAS, or Python, where you write a chunk of code and then it puts an output, except it mixes together the code and the output in the same document. It's not sort of like you're writing your script over here and then the plot shows up over here, or in a window that you have to save. And then you can also put in, text to sort of say like, oh, this is the model that I think is correct. And then you have your code for your model, and then you have the output, and then you put your notes about this is what I thought the model says. And so this is what's called literate programming. And it's just a really great way to share your results and your analysis and your thought process. And like Chris said, it's then supposed to be more collaborative. If you've ever tried to look at someone else's code, it can be a little bit of a head scratcher sometimes. And so the appeal of having something like a notebook is that you can explain what you're doing as you're doing it. So it's a lot easier to collaborate and share.
Yeah, great. I've actually, increasingly asked more of my people just from other projects to work in notebooks. It's just, I don't know, the experience of even coming back to your own code a few months from now, I'm oftentimes like, what was this about? And so, a notebook helps communicate with yourself, your future self as well.
Right. And then you have less worrying about, package versions and was there some bug that broke everything, because it's all wrapped up inside it.
Brian, this is Rod. I guess, I'm one of the users of the on-farm trial data, and we talked about sort of easy database access and download for that kind of, is this sort of part of that effort?
Yeah, this is all wrapped up in it. The sort of unfortunate thing is that you're a Stata user, are you not?
Yeah, but I use SAS too, so it's not an
Right,
issue.
so we may have to transition you into using SAS, because I'm not familiar with any offerings for Stata in this kind of platform.
But have you, because the last time we talked, it's sort of, we were trying to sort of move that to a sort of accessible.
Yeah, so the way the back end
already, or when do you?
Is that we have a back-end programmer now, Rick Hitchcock, I don't know if he's on the call, who has spent an illustrious career at the University of Georgia providing interfaces to decision support tools and models, mostly related to nitrogen decomposition, which you're going to hear about in a little bit. But as our back-end programmer, he is building out the sort of infrastructure needed to make this sort of thing work, where you just log in and it knows who you are, what access permissions you have, and how to serve up the data that you need.
Brian, we've got a couple more questions coming in too, a couple good ones. One is about presenting data back to the growers, and it's an excellent question. I'll highlight there's two ways here. First of all is the farmer dashboards are to provide live data access back to the farmers. That's facilitated by the API that Brian was just talking about. We're looking for engagement for folks to really test out some of those farmer dashboards. They're continuing to evolve. We want to hear about everybody who's directly working with growers. You know, do you like how this, and asking your growers, do you like how this data is coming back to them in the live data feeds? Then also, you know, folks may want to do their own presentations back to growers, and, you know, creating their own graphics and their own. So what we ask is, you know, what the whole point here is that we're not downloading, you know, all of this data onto people's laptops, but you're producing graphics, you're producing data summaries in the cloud environment, and those are very much meant to be shared with growers. We just ask that, you know, those are for in group presentations, we you know, we have some anonymization right now that we're doing on that, and so we can talk about that more another time, so that, you know, we only are releasing grower data when it's with consent. So, but again, you know, that personal data, the individual farm data, the growers should be getting all the major metrics back on their farmer dashboard. I think I saw another question here. There's so many came in here. Oh, Mickey, you had a good question about, okay, so GPS coordinates we are communicating with growers, and Jen has been working hard about that, communicate to growers that we are collecting GPS points from their farms. There's really no way for us to avoid doing that with what we're doing. So it is considered a mandatory part of being in the network, but it's with consent, so that people understand that that is part of being in the network.
I think Mickey's point was about the farmer survey, which also will be collecting geolocation data, which is something that we had not considered might, you know, become useful in other parts of the analysis.
Oh, got it. Okay, sorry, that was about the surveying. Excellent.
Well, and this, I mean, and it does raise that broader point around, and this is not a conversation for right now, but just to let people know that we're having this conversation, and we're really have been like kind of machinating and digging in about that issue of GPS data and how essential it is for all of the other research that's going on, and the matching up of satellite data with the data we're collecting and so on. And how do we disclose to farmers that this is part of the data set that is being collected on their fields, and at the same time, one of the get a sense of their comfort with sharing various kinds of data, various levels of specificity. So this is a really, really big and sticky issue, because we obviously can't do a lot of the analyses we want to do unless we have GPS data, and at the same time, GPS data is, you know, identifiable and is personal. So we're trying to figure out the best ways to communicate this. And then to Brian's clarification, surveys and other stuff like that are human subjects data, which kind of go through another set of approvals, and those have a different level of consent that need to be and disclosure that need to go through participants. So that's going to be another conversation, but they're not unrelated. So
you know, this is really good, Jen. And so I know that this venue for this meeting was not, we weren't ready for this prime time, but maybe we do want to, you know, think as this matures and finalizes. Like, I know that document that you and Meredith and others have been spearheading, and I've been interacting with it a little bit. Maybe we do want to identify a mechanism across the network to get that reaction and identify when that might occur, because I know you've been thinking deeply about this for a while.
yeah, I mean, whoops. I have to get rid of my phone.
We can hear you and there's no echo.
Yeah, anyway, just my point there is that we do need to make sure that we both start running it by farmers and getting their feedback, which is what we're including in the survey, but also really get a deeper understanding. I mean, we're really in uncharted territory for a lot of this. And I think in really important ways, we have to figure out how to navigate these spaces where we are stitching together data from a lot of sources, and it does require spatial data. And how do we do that without violating any trust of our growers and our partners?
Thank you, social sciences team and Jen, for pioneering that important part of the work that we're doing here. And I'll also remind, I saw another comment in there too, like the yield monitor data that we're doing, that is a brand new thing. So we will be circulating a link to everyone soon, and that will allow the growers to opt in. And that actually is a legal opt-in there. It's one of the few times we have a legal opt-in, and so they will actually, over the web, agree to share that data with us, and it'll list out the restrictions and all the details about that combine yield data. So